Did you know that in Japan, people over 65 have a 60% lower rate of hip fractures compared to Americans of the same age? That's not genetics. That's movement. Every morning in parks across Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyoto, you'll see something remarkable. Seniors in their 70s and 80s moving with a fluidity that would make many 40-year-olds jealous. They're not doing complicated workouts or expensive physical therapy. They're practicing simple movements that have been passed down for generations. Here's what they don't tell you in America. Your hips are the foundation of every step you take, every stair you climb, every time you get up from a chair. When your hips weaken, everything else follows. Your back compensates. Your knees take extra stress. Your balance suffers. But there's something Japanese seniors know that we're just discovering here in the West. Today, I'm going to share 7 movements that Japanese seniors do every single day to keep their hips strong, their walking steady, and their independence intact well into their 90s. The 7th movement is so simple you can do it while watching television, yet it's responsible for more hip stability than most people get from months of traditional exercise. But first, the 6th movement will surprise you because it's something you probably think you're already doing correctly. Before we dive in, I'm curious. Drop a comment and let me know how old you are and if you've noticed any changes in how your hips feel when you walk or stand up. This information helps me understand who's watching and what challenges you might be facing. The 7th movement Japanese seniors swear by is called Ashi-ageri, which translates to gentle leg lifting. You've probably seen leg lifts before, but the Japanese version has 3 critical differences that make all the difference for hip strength after 60. Here's why your hips need this specific attention. Inside your hip joint, you have a ring of cartilage called the labrum. Think of it like a gasket that keeps your thigh bone properly seated in your hip socket. As we age, this cartilage can wear down, especially if we spend too much time sitting or walking in ways that don't fully engage our hip muscles. When that happens, walking becomes harder. Stairs become a challenge and getting up from low chairs turns into a struggle. Research from multiple Japanese orthopedic centers has tracked thousands of seniors for over 2 decades, and they consistently find that people who maintain specific hip movement patterns have dramatically lower rates of mobility loss and hip problems. The numbers are striking when you compare them to Western populations who don't practice these movements. Let me tell you about Kenji, a 74-year-old retired carpenter from Nagoya. 2 years ago, he started noticing that his morning walks with his wife were getting shorter. His hips felt stiff, and climbing the stairs to their second-floor apartment left him winded. His doctor suggested physical therapy, but Kenji decided to return to the movements his grandfather had taught him decades earlier. Within 3 weeks of daily Ashi-ageri practice, he was walking farther than he had in months. 6 months later, he was hiking mountain trails again. Here's how you do Ashi-ageri correctly. Stand next to a wall or sturdy chair for light support. Plant your left foot firmly on the ground. Engage your core gently and lift your right leg forward. But here's the Japanese secret. Don't lift it high. Lift it only to about hip height or lower if that's comfortable. Hold for 3 seconds while keeping your standing leg slightly bent, not locked straight. This engages your hip stabilizers in a way that mimics real walking patterns. Lower slowly and repeat 8 times. Switch legs. The key difference from Western leg lifts is the timing and the standing leg position. Japanese seniors focus on the control during the lowering phase and the stability of the supporting leg. Do this twice daily, morning and evening. If 8 repetitions feel like too much, start with 4. If you need more challenge after a few weeks, add a very light ankle weight, no more than 1 pound. But there's something even more important than proper leg lifting. And it's the 6th movement that most Americans think they're already doing right. The 6th movement is called Shizuka-aruki, or quiet walking. You might think walking is just walking, but Japanese seniors practice a specific style that protects their hips and builds strength with every step. Your hip joint is designed to work like a ball and socket, but only if you walk in a way that allows the ball to move freely in all directions. Most Americans walk with their feet slightly turned out and take steps that are either too long or too short for their body's natural mechanics. This creates uneven wear on the hip joint over time, like driving a car with misaligned wheels. Studies from major rehabilitation centers show that people who modify their walking pattern can reduce hip joint stress by up to 40% while actually increasing the strength-building benefits of each step. The research focuses on gait modifications that work specifically for people over 60, accounting for changes in balance and muscle mass that naturally occur with aging. Take Michiko, a 68-year-old former teacher from Sendai. She loved her daily walks through the city, but over several months she began feeling a nagging ache in her right hip that got worse throughout the day. Instead of stopping her walks, she learned Shizuka-aruki from her neighbor. The technique felt awkward at first, but within 2 weeks the hip discomfort was gone. More importantly, she found she could walk longer distances without getting tired. A year later, she completed a 10-kilometer charity walk that she never would have attempted before. Here's how to practice quiet walking. Start by standing tall with your feet pointing straight ahead, not turned out. Take a step that's about 75% of your normal stride length. As you step, think about placing your foot down softly. Heel first, then rolling through to your toes. The quiet part means you shouldn't hear your feet hitting the ground hard. Keep your hips level. Don't let them drop to one side with each step. Practice this for 5 minutes twice a day, perhaps when you're walking to get the mail or moving around your house. Focus on the softness of your footsteps and keeping your stride length comfortable rather than long. After a week, you can gradually return to your normal stride length while maintaining the soft footstep and straight-ahead foot position. This pattern will start to feel natural and actually requires less energy than the way most people walk. The beauty of quiet walking is that it strengthens your hips while protecting them from unnecessary impact. But it's the fifth movement that addresses something even more fundamental. The fifth movement tackles what Japanese seniors call the hidden weakness that most people over 60 develop without realizing it. It's called Koshi-mawashi, which means hip circling, but it's not what you might expect. Here's what happens to your hips that nobody talks about. You have muscles deep inside your hip joint called the deep hip rotators. These are small muscles you've probably never heard of, but they control the fine movements that keep your hip socket stable when you walk, turn, or change direction. After age 60, these muscles often become weak and tight from years of sitting, limited movement variety, and the natural changes that come with aging. When your deep hip rotators don't work properly, your larger hip muscles have to work overtime. This creates a cascade of problems. Your glutes get overworked and tired faster. Your hip flexors get tight from compensating. Your lower back takes on stress it wasn't designed to handle. Eventually, simple activities like getting out of a car or stepping over a curb become more difficult than they should be. Research from rehabilitation specialists has identified that maintaining deep hip rotator function is one of the strongest predictors of walking independence. In people over 70, these small muscles are trainable at any age, but they respond best to specific movement patterns rather than traditional strengthening exercises. Consider Hiroshi, a 71-year-old retired engineer who noticed he was having trouble getting comfortable in his car seat. Long drives to visit his grandchildren were becoming painful, and he found himself avoiding trips he used to enjoy. His wife suggested he try the hip-circling exercises she'd learned in her senior movement class. Hiroshi was skeptical but tried them every morning for 2 weeks. The difference was remarkable. Not only could he sit comfortably in the car again, but he also noticed his balance felt more stable when walking on uneven surfaces. Here's how to do Koshi-mawashi safely and effectively. Sit on the edge of a sturdy chair with your feet flat on the floor, about shoulder width apart. Place your hands on your thighs for support. Now, move your hips in a small circle, as if you're stirring a pot with your pelvis. Start with very small circles, about the size of a dinner plate. Make 5 slow circles in one direction, then 5 in the other direction. The key is to keep the movement slow and controlled. You should feel a gentle stretching and movement through your entire hip area, but no pain. If you feel any sharp discomfort, make your circles smaller or take a break. After a week of daily practice, you can gradually make your circles slightly larger, but never force the movement. This exercise is about mobility and control, not range of motion. Do this exercise twice daily, perhaps right after you wake up and again in the evening while watching television. The morning session helps prepare your hips for the day's activities, while the evening session helps release tension that builds up from daily activities. But improving hip mobility is only part of the equation. The fourth movement addresses hip strength in a way that's completely different from what most fitness programs recommend. The fourth movement is called Kabe-oshi, or wall pushing, and it targets hip strength in the exact way your hips need to work during daily activities. Most hip strengthening exercises you see in fitness programs focus on lying down or using gym equipment. But your hips need to be strong when you're upright, fighting gravity, and coordinating with your core and leg muscles. Japanese seniors discovered long ago that the best way to build functional hip strength is to practice movements that mirror real-life situations while providing just enough challenge to stimulate muscle growth. Your hip muscles work as a team to keep your pelvis stable when you're standing on one leg, walking upstairs, or stepping over obstacles. This teamwork requires not just strength but coordination between different muscle groups. When you practice hip strengthening in positions that don't match how you actually use your hips, the strength gains don't transfer well to daily activities. Studies from sports medicine research have shown that exercises performed in standing positions with some degree of instability create better functional strength gains for older adults compared to traditional lying down exercises. The research specifically looked at people over 60 and measured improvements in real-world activities like stair climbing and walking on uneven surfaces. Meet Yuki, a 66-year-old grandmother who loves gardening but was struggling with the constant bending, squatting, and getting back up that her hobby required. Her knees were fine, but her hips felt weak and unreliable during these movements. She started practicing wall-pushing exercises every morning before going out to tend her plants. Within a month, she could spend 2 hours in her garden without the hip fatigue that used to limit her to 30 minutes. Her confidence in her movement returned, and she even started a small vegetable garden that required more physical work. Here's how to perform Kabe-oshi correctly. Stand facing a wall, about arm's length away. Place your palms flat against the wall at shoulder height and shoulder width apart. Step your right foot back about 12 inches while keeping your left foot planted. Now, shift your weight slightly forward and push gently against the wall while keeping your back straight. You should feel your left hip working to stabilize your body. Hold this position for 10 seconds, focusing on keeping your left hip steady and strong. Switch legs and repeat on the other side. The key is not to push hard against the wall, but to create just enough resistance that your hip muscles have to engage to keep you stable. Do 3 holds on each side, twice daily. If this feels too easy after a week, step your back foot a little farther away from the wall. If it feels too challenging, step closer to the wall or hold for fewer seconds. The goal is to feel your hip muscles working without strain or discomfort. This exercise builds the exact type of hip stability you need for walking, climbing stairs, and maintaining balance in daily activities. But building hip strength is meaningless if you don't address the flexibility issue that affects nearly everyone over 60, which brings us to the third movement. The third movement addresses what might be the most overlooked cause of hip problems in people over 60. It's called Hip-nobashi, which translates to hip lengthening, and it targets a specific area that becomes problematic for almost everyone who spends significant time sitting. Here's the hidden problem. You have a muscle called the psoas that connects your spine to your thigh bone, running right through the core of your body. This muscle is designed to help you lift your legs and maintain posture, but modern life turns it into a source of hip dysfunction. Every hour you spend sitting, your psoas shortens a little bit. Over years and decades, this muscle becomes chronically tight and pulls on your hip joint in ways that interfere with normal movement. When your psoas is tight, it creates a chain reaction of problems. It tilts your pelvis forward, which compresses the front of your hip joint. It makes your hip flexors work harder than they should. It can contribute to lower back pain that seems unrelated to your hips. Most importantly, it limits your ability to stand up straight and walk with proper hip mechanics, no matter how strong your other hip muscles become. Research from physical therapy specialists has identified tight hip flexors as one of the primary contributors to walking difficulties in older adults. The studies show that addressing hip flexor tightness can improve walking speed, reduce fall risk, and decrease hip discomfort more effectively than strengthening exercises alone. The key is using stretches that target the deep hip flexors without putting stress on the lower back. Let me share the story of Robert, a 69-year-old retired office worker who spent 40 years behind a desk. Even though he'd been retired for 4 years and stayed active with golf and yard work, he couldn't shake the feeling that his hips were stuck. Walking felt effortful, and he found himself taking shorter steps than he wanted to. His doctor suggested stretching, but the typical stretches he tried either hurt his back or didn't seem to help. When he learned Hip-nobashi, the difference was immediate. After just 1 week, he felt like he was walking taller and with less effort. 3 months later, he was walking 18 holes of golf instead of riding in a cart. Here's how to practice Hip-nobashi safely and effectively. You'll need a sturdy chair or the edge of your bed. Stand in front of the chair and place your left foot up on the seat with your knee bent at about 90 degrees. Your right leg stays on the ground, straight but not locked. Now, gently push your hips forward while keeping your chest upright. You should feel a stretch in the front of your right hip and thigh. The key to this stretch is subtlety. You don't need to push your hips forward very far to get the benefit. Hold the stretch for 30 seconds, breathing normally. Switch legs and repeat. The stretch should feel good, like you're opening up space in your hip joint. If you feel any pinching or sharp pain, reduce the amount you're pushing forward or try placing your foot on a lower surface. Do this stretch twice daily, ideally after you've been sitting for a while or before you go for a walk. Morning is particularly beneficial because your hip flexors tighten up overnight. Evening stretching helps release tension from the day's activities. After 2 weeks of consistent practice, you should notice that standing up straight feels easier and walking requires less conscious effort. But even with improved flexibility, there's a balance component that most people overlook, and that's what the second movement addresses. The second movement is going to surprise you because it's so simple that most people dismiss it as too easy to be effective. It's called Katashi-dachi, or single leg standing. But the Japanese version has specific modifications that make it incredibly effective for hip stability and fall prevention. Balance and hip strength are more connected than most people realize. Your hip muscles don't just move your legs. They constantly make tiny adjustments to keep you upright and stable. When you stand on one leg, even for a few seconds, you're forcing these stabilizing muscles to work in ways that walking and other activities don't fully challenge. This creates a training effect that carries over into better balance during all your daily activities. Here's what happens when your hip stability improves. Your confidence in your movement increases. You're less likely to avoid activities because you're worried about falling or losing your balance. You can navigate uneven surfaces, curbs, and stairs with more assurance. These psychological benefits are just as important as the physical ones, because fear of falling often leads to reduced activity, which leads to further weakening and increased fall risk. Studies from major medical centers have consistently shown that people who practice single-leg standing exercises have significantly lower fall rates compared to those who don't. The research shows that improvements can be seen in as little as 4 weeks of daily practice, with the greatest benefits occurring in people who start the practice after age 60. The key is using proper technique and progressing gradually. Think about Taro, a 73-year-old who loved taking his dog for walks through his neighborhood. Over several months, he became increasingly nervous about the uneven sidewalks and small obstacles he encountered on these walks. He started taking shorter routes and avoiding areas where he might have to step over something or walk on grass or gravel. His wife encouraged him to try balance exercises, and he started with simple single-leg standing. Within 6 weeks, he was back to taking his dog on longer adventures, feeling confident about his ability to handle unexpected challenges along the way. Here's how to practice Katashi-dachi with the Japanese modifications that make it so effective. Stand next to a wall or sturdy furniture that you can lightly touch for support if needed. Start by lifting your right foot just a few inches off the ground, keeping your knee slightly bent. The key is to focus on the hip of your standing leg. Feel how the muscles around your left hip are working to keep you upright and stable. Hold this position for 15 seconds initially, building up to 30 seconds over several weeks. The Japanese secret is to do this exercise with your eyes open, then progress to doing it with your eyes closed for short periods. This challenges your balance system in different ways and creates better real-world stability. Switch legs and repeat on the other side. If 15 seconds feels too challenging, start by just lifting your foot slightly and touching it back down immediately, then lifting again. Build up your endurance gradually. If it feels too easy, try closing your eyes for a few seconds during the hold, or try turning your head slowly from side to side while maintaining your balance. The goal is to challenge yourself just enough that your hip muscles have to work, but not so much that you feel unsteady or unsafe. Practice this exercise twice daily, perhaps while brushing your teeth or waiting for your coffee to brew. The beauty of single-leg standing is that it integrates easily into your daily routine and provides immediate feedback about your progress. But even perfect balance means nothing if you don't address the number one movement that can transform your hip health and walking ability. The first and most powerful movement that Japanese seniors practice daily is called Shinja-ho, which means deep trust walking. This isn't just a movement. It's a complete approach to how you use your hips during one of the most important activities of your day. Here's what most people don't understand about walking after 60. Every step you take is either building your hip strength and stability or slowly undermining it. The difference lies in how you initiate each step and where you focus your attention during the movement. Japanese seniors have identified that the moment your foot leaves the ground to take a step is the most critical moment for hip health, and most people completely waste this opportunity. When you walk with conventional Western patterns, you tend to lead with your knees and think about where your feet are going to land. This puts your hip muscles in a passive role, just along for the ride. But when you walk with Shinja-ho principles, you initiate each step from deep within your hip joint, engaging the powerful muscles around your pelvis and creating strength-building opportunities with every single step you take. Research from movement specialists has found that people who modify their walking initiation patterns show measurable increases in hip muscle activation and improvements in walking efficiency. The studies indicate that these changes can occur within days of starting the new pattern, with significant improvements in hip stability and walking endurance appearing within 4 to 6 weeks. Most remarkably, people report that walking feels easier and more enjoyable when they use these techniques. Let me tell you about Akiko, a 78-year-old retired nurse who had always been proud of her mobility and independence. Over the course of a year, she gradually noticed that her daily walks were becoming more tiring and less enjoyable. She wasn't having pain, but walking just felt harder than it used to. Her daughter suggested she might need to accept that she was getting older and perhaps walk shorter distances. Instead, Akiko decided to relearn how to walk using the principles her grandmother had taught her as a child. The change was dramatic. Within 2 weeks, her walks felt effortless again. Within 2 months, she was walking farther than she had in years and feeling energized rather than tired afterward. Here's how to practice Shinja-ho and transform your daily walking into a hip-strengthening activity. Start by standing still and becoming aware of your hip joints. Place your hands lightly on your hips and feel the bony prominences there. Now, instead of thinking about moving your foot forward, think about initiating your step from deep inside your hip joint. Imagine that there's a string attached to the top of your thigh bone, and that string is gently pulling your leg forward from inside your hip. Take a slow step forward, focusing on this internal initiation. You should feel the muscles deep in your hip joint engage before your foot ever leaves the ground. Your knee and foot follow naturally, but they're not leading the movement. The power and control come from your hip. Take several steps this way, paying attention to how different it feels from your normal walking pattern. Practice this conscious hip initiation for 5 minutes twice daily, perhaps when walking from room to room in your house or during the first few minutes of any outdoor walk. After a week, this pattern will start to feel more natural. After a month, you can maintain this hip-focused walking pattern for longer distances without conscious thought. The transformation this creates is remarkable. Your hips get stronger with every step instead of just maintaining their current strength. Your walking becomes more efficient because you're using your powerful hip muscles rather than relying on smaller muscles to do the work. Your balance improves because you're engaging your core stabilizers with each step. Most importantly, walking becomes something that energizes you rather than something that drains you. But here's what ties all 7 movements together into a daily practice that can truly transform how your hips feel and function. Japanese seniors don't do these movements as isolated exercises. They weave them into a daily rhythm that supports their hips from morning until night. This approach recognizes that your hips are working all day long, and they need consistent, gentle attention rather than intense, infrequent workouts. The morning routine starts with hip circling while still sitting on the edge of the bed, followed by the hip lengthening stretch to counteract the tightness that develops overnight. This prepares your hips for the day ahead and takes less than 3 minutes. The walking practice begins with the first steps out of bed, using the deep trust walking pattern to turn every trip to the kitchen or bathroom into a hip-strengthening opportunity. Throughout the day, Japanese seniors incorporate single-leg standing during routine activities, wall pushing during breaks from sitting, and quiet walking whenever they're moving from place to place. The evening routine includes gentle leg lifting while watching television and another session of hip circling to release the day's tension. This isn't about finding time for exercise. It's about transforming activities you're already doing into opportunities for hip health and strength. The Japanese approach recognizes that consistency matters more than intensity, and that small daily actions compound into significant improvements over time. The research on this integrated approach shows remarkable results. People who adopt these daily movement patterns show improvements in walking speed, stair climbing ability, balance confidence, and hip comfort that surpass what's typically seen with traditional exercise programs. More importantly, these improvements are sustained over time because the practices become part of daily life rather than something extra to fit into an already busy schedule. Think about how different your days could feel 6 months from now. Imagine walking with the confidence and ease you had 20 years ago. Picture yourself moving through your daily activities without thinking twice about whether your hips can handle the demands. Consider the freedom that comes from knowing your body is getting stronger, rather than weaker with each passing day. Beauty of the Japanese approach is that it works with your body's natural patterns rather than against them. These movements don't require special equipment, gym memberships, or significant time commitments. They require only the willingness to pay attention to how you move and make small adjustments that support your hip health throughout the day. Your hips have carried you through decades of life, adapting to whatever demands you've placed on them. They have remarkable capacity for improvement, even after years of neglect or gradual decline. The Japanese seniors who practice these movements well into their 90s are proof that age alone doesn't determine mobility. How you move determines mobility. Every step you take today is an opportunity to support your hip health or undermine it. Every time you stand up from a chair, you can engage your hips in ways that build strength or ignore them and let weakness progress. Every moment of sitting can include gentle movements that maintain hip mobility or be another period of stiffening and tightening. The choice is always yours, and it's never too late to start making choices that support your long-term mobility and independence. The Japanese seniors who glide through their daily activities with grace and confidence didn't get there by accident. They got there by paying attention to their movement patterns and making small, consistent adjustments that compound into remarkable results over time. These 7 movements are not just exercises. They're a different way of thinking about your relationship with your body as you age. Instead of expecting decline and trying to slow it down, you can expect improvement and take daily actions to create it. Instead of seeing aging as something that happens to you, you can see it as something you actively participate in shaping. Your hips are designed to serve you well throughout your entire life, but they need the right kind of attention and care to do so. The Japanese approach provides that care in a way that feels natural, sustainable, and increasingly rewarding as you experience the benefits. The difference between people who maintain their mobility and those who gradually lose it often comes down to small daily choices that seem insignificant in the moment but create profound differences over time. The choice to initiate your steps from your hips rather than your knees. The choice to spend 2 minutes doing gentle hip circles rather than sitting motionless. The choice to practice balancing on one leg while waiting for your coffee to brew. These choices don't require heroic effort or dramatic lifestyle changes. They require awareness, consistency, and trust in your body's ability to respond positively to appropriate movement. The Japanese seniors who inspired these practices understood that the goal isn't to turn back the clock, but to make sure that each day forward is supported by a body that feels strong, stable, and reliable. As you begin to incorporate these movements into your daily routine, pay attention to how your hips feel not just during the exercises, but throughout your regular activities. Notice if getting up from chairs becomes easier. Observe whether walking feels more effortless or enjoyable. Be aware of any changes in your confidence when navigating stairs, uneven surfaces, or crowded spaces. These improvements often happen gradually, and sometimes they're so subtle that you might not notice them until you realize that something that used to be difficult is now easy, or something that used to cause discomfort no longer bothers you. This is how real, sustainable change happens in your body, not through dramatic transformations, but through consistent, gentle improvements that accumulate into significant differences over time. The 7 movements I've shared represent centuries of accumulated wisdom about how to age with grace and maintain independence. They've been tested not in laboratories, but in the daily lives of thousands of Japanese seniors who have discovered that the right kind of movement can truly transform how aging feels. Your journey with these movements will be uniquely yours. Some may feel easier than others. Some may produce faster results than others. The important thing is to begin where you are, with whatever capacity you currently have, and trust that consistent practice will lead to improvement. Remember that every expert was once a beginner, and every person who moves with grace and confidence at 80 once had to learn how to support their body through the changes that come with aging. You have the same capacity for improvement that they did. You have the same potential for maintaining and even enhancing your mobility as the years pass. The Japanese concept of continuous small improvements applies perfectly to hip health and mobility. Each day that you practice these movements, you're making a small investment in your future self. Each week that you maintain consistency, you're building a foundation of strength and stability that will serve you well in the years to come. Each month that you continue the practice, you're proving to yourself that aging doesn't have to mean declining. Your hips are waiting for the attention and care that will allow them to support you through all the activities and adventures that lie ahead. They're ready to respond to the gentle, consistent movement that will keep them strong, flexible, and reliable. They're prepared to carry you forward with confidence and ease, regardless of what your age might be today. The question isn't whether these movements will help your hips. The research and the experiences of countless Japanese seniors have already answered that question. The question is whether you're ready to give your hips the daily attention they deserve, and discover how much better movement can feel when you're working with your body rather than against it. Which of these 7 movements feels most important for your current hip health? And what's your plan for incorporating it into your daily routine? I'd love to hear about your experience as you begin this journey toward stronger, more reliable hips and the freedom of movement that comes with them.